thank you everybody for having me. So we just spent all day talking about something that I'm now going to tell you is dead. So it's not quite dead, but I do want to talk a little bit because the industry is shifting. And I think we all see that. So just out of curiosity, how many people are either now or have recently been actively looking for a job? Quite a few. So how many of you have seen job descriptions that sound something like this? We want a UX strategist who has an MFA in visual design and can speak to CEOs. Oh, and you know jQuery and JavaScript and CSS and code, right? You see a lot of those. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. And the first thing I'm going to tell you is I assure you, you don't actually need to be that person. Customers are not going to find that person. But there are things that you can do within your skill set that are going to help you become a little bit more competitive. And they're going to help you because I want you to broaden your mind a little bit. And I'm not saying go out and take a JavaScript class, but broaden your mind a little bit about the discipline that you're actually working in. So I also now want to take a little bit of a survey. So how many people are working in a job with the title UX in it in some form? So UX architect, okay. Visual designers? All right, BA? Any BAs in the room? How about UI developer, coder, something to that effect? Great, so project management, I know we got at least one because you talked earlier. And I know we have a content strategist, but she already did a survey, so I know she's the only one in the room. So there's a pretty wide mix of people here, and I think a lot of us, yes, sure, I was messing with that.
Start over again.
I was not, do you want me to start over? I was not appropriately dressed for being mic'd, so somebody should have warned me to wear pants. But anyway, it's a broad mix, but the idea is each of us 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, or geez, when I started 20 years ago, we were kind of specialized, and there were a lot of us. And I was a creative designer. I started in visual design and sort of broadened out. And when I started my career at NTT Data 9 years ago, the UX team, when we went in for a project, it was typically about, oh, I don't know, 5 or 6 people. You'd have a UX strategist, and they were responsible for setting the strategy for the whole thing. Then we'd have 2 research associates. The research associates would be responsible for creating the scripts for research and going out and conducting the research. And keep in mind, these are for huge clients, Fortune 500, Honeywell, so big systems. Then we'd have a couple of UX architects or information architects, and their job is to take what we learned in the research and actually document it. And then we'd have 1, maybe 2 visual designers to actually create something. And we'd have, oh, I don't know, 8 weeks. Ronnie and I used to work together. We'd get like 6 to 8 weeks. We'd have a whole team, and it was a big kumbaya, and we really enjoyed ourselves. Now, we just delivered something for one of the largest insurance companies in the United States with 1.5 UX people. 1.5, that's what I got. I had a strategist who also knew how to do wireframes, and I had an experienced architect who also knew how to design. We just don't get those teams anymore, and we don't get to specialize like that anymore. And I see a lot of people nodding their heads, so I know I'm not alone. And there's a lot of us out there talking about what does that mean? What does that mean for us? Thank you. So, you know, is UX architect half a designer, right? If you can't do design and you're just architecting and doing wireframes and you can't visualize it, are you this? And this is us, by the way. This is us talking. I didn't pull these are people in the UX world talking. You know, UX is the death of UX. My favorite quote up here, if wireframes aren't dead, I'd be more than happy to take it outside and put a bullet in its head. Now, that sounds pretty bad, right? It sounds like, why do we hate what we do so much? But that's not it. It is true that UX, user experience architecture, in that traditional sense of the word, with the reams and reams of requirements, it's going away. And it's going away either because the necessity is not there, or in the case of this guy, some of us are killing them, and we're killing them because we're realizing there's a better way. We're delivering huge documents to developers who then don't read them because they're too long, and then they just go off and develop whatever they want, and then they don't understand why we're yelling at them. Everybody's laughing because you guys have lived through this, right? We've lived through this. So many of us are killing UX architecture because basically we're going to kill it before it kills us, right? So then you also think about, well, why is it changing? Well, there's probably at least 4 presentations today that you guys have seen that should explain why it's changing. Technology is changing. It's everywhere. I want what I want when I want. I want to engineer my own experience. Trying to architect something like that is almost like trying to design a house in somebody's dream. So if anybody's ever had a weird dream in a house, like you think you know what it is and you go through and then all of a sudden the hallway changes, or has anybody seen the movie 13 Ghosts? It's a really creepy movie, and that's basically the house. It's like trying to document that. You can't, because the person, by being in the house, is changing the house. That's why that whole architect concept doesn't work. So we killed it, right? It's dead. We blew it all to hell. We did it. Now what? Are we all out of jobs? Well, no, luckily we're not, I don't think. I'm still hiring people now and then. But we have to break out of that mindset of, we have to run screaming from that whole architecture metaphor, because it just doesn't apply to what we do anymore, and it scares clients off. Because then that's when clients come to us and say, I don't have enough money for that. I'll have a client, a $19 million development project, that will tell me, I don't have time for that, we're agile. So I have to make him understand, so are we, and here's how we are, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a minute. So what are the silos that we're getting out of? We aren't creating timeless structures. Experiencers they're not solid, they're not even liquid. I don't even know if we can describe them. They're almost like thoughts. They shift depending on context, on need, on intention, on ideas. Like the dream house I talked about, you can't architect that, so you got to get away from the word architect. What are we doing? I think what we're doing is much closer to a psychotherapist, to a group therapist. So imagine that the experience is somebody who's maybe a little delusional, and we want to guide the experience, and we want to help the experience come along. And then imagine your user is part of this group, and we want them to, if anybody knows anything about the idea behind group therapy, the therapist doesn't come in and tell you what you need to do and tell you what's wrong. The therapist comes in and gives you tools to help you figure out what you need to do, and they give you tools to help you figure out how you should go. Now apply that metaphor to what we do and to somebody being able to create their own experience. They can enter and exit an experience at any point that they choose. So we have a lot of insurance clients, so if you talk about how somebody chooses to do an insurance scenario, for lack of a better word, well, I may want to get an online quote. I might want to talk to somebody maybe when I'm actually purchasing the insurance. But say for example, my house burns down, I promise you I want to talk to somebody. I don't want to get into an online forum. So if you think about that, it's that contextual scenario, and if the user experience person has designed that experience properly, I'm gonna just inherently know which channel. It's not that I'm gonna know which channel I'm supposed to use. I'm gonna be able to use whatever channel I want, and it's going to work in a way that I expect. And I talk to clients about that, and they get a little scared because they're like, oh my God, you're gonna design 1,000 scenarios. You're gonna design a journey map that's got 500 steps. No, you have to come up a level and look at what is the guidance that I need to give here? What are the points that can't be unmoving? And you have to be on a team with other people like BAs and developers, to find out what are the parameters that we have to work within. It's just like therapy. But we're also designers. Don't forget, we're designers at heart. So our job isn't just to, help people and experiences come to a cathartic moment where they know what to do. It's to point to the future. And the only way you can really point to the future is to draw it, to sketch it, to visualize it. Now, I can't draw, believe it or not. I have an art background. Can't draw. Without a computer, I would not have a career. But that's not what I mean by draw. It's that we have to get out of describing what we do in words. We have to get out of describing an experience in words. So how many people have read Lean UX by Jeff Gothelf? Jeff Gothelf. If you have not read the book Lean UX, read it. Because it's not, I don't read business books, trust me. It's not that kind of business books. It's got a lot of tools and techniques for how to quickly, visually sketch, for people who don't even know how to sketch ideas, so that you can all come to a common idea of what it is you're talking about visually. So many of us it happens to me sometimes, are a little bit sad at this new way, because this new way of doing things where we're being more collaborative, where we're sketching things quickly, where we're getting together with people and we're not telling them what to do, we're helping to co-create experiences. Well, sometimes, I miss the days when we used to be the smartest people in the room. And why were we the smartest people in the room? Because we went out there and we were doing research, right? We did all the research. We came to that first meeting having already talked to all of the stakeholders, and we already talked to all the users, and we're there with the BAs and the developers, and what do they know? They weren't out there, and we excelled at the obvious. That's what I always called it. It was the obvious that was not obvious to others. We excelled at pointing out to people stuff that anybody should know, but that they didn't. Well, with the prevalence of design thinking and with product designers now sitting in C-suite positions, we're not the only ones that are thinking that way. The stuff that's obvious to us is becoming obvious to everybody. And I would argue, because I still sometimes will go to a meeting and I feel like I'm the smartest person in the room, and that's when I know I am in the wrong room. So if you as a UX person are going into a client meeting and they don't understand what you're talking about, and you're just like, oh my God, these people are so stupid, I don't get it. UX is probably not elevated enough on that for that client for you to truly make an impact. Now, don't get me wrong. I work for a huge company and we have huge clients, and there are, go ahead and record it. I have plenty of meetings with clients that look like this. Let me put it that way. So we still have projects where I do need to just send a UX person there, and there is a UX architect on that project for 6 months cranking out wireframes. It's still necessary, but think about the topic of, what is the topic of this thing that we're here to talk about today? It's the future. And while it is still necessary now, even for some of my most steadfast financial clients with all of the regulations in the world bearing down on them, is shifting to agile methodologies, right? They're shifting to agile for development. That means we have to shift to agile too. We can't be this, stage gatekeeper that is, you can't do any of this development. We need to be agile with the development team and moving forward, and we need to be thinking differently. So these things where people think that UX is just something, well, we'll get somebody to do wireframes for 6 months, I would wager in a year you're not going to see that, and in 5 years you're certainly not going to see that. And I will bet anything that in 10 years people aren't even going to know what the heck we were talking about when we talk about this, because things are changing so quickly. So we have to adapt. And I think we all know that. I think we're all having these conversations now, and the fact that there was such an interdisciplinary group of people that have been talking today, I think we already recognize this. But what does it mean? Where do we go? What do we do? So I want to think a little bit about what are the UX skills. And I sort of view that the UX skills are, it's almost like it's a matrix. And you could be in any different area, whether you're content strategy, or you're a developer, or a business analyst, or a designer. You're somewhere on this matrix. And I would argue, if what you do is in one of these far corners, you have to adapt. You can't be in one of these far corners. You have to expand your skill set. That does not mean be the unicorn. It doesn't mean, it's, if you're in the middle, well, good luck to you. You could write your own paycheck. But I'm not expecting any of us to be in the middle. So I want to look at this spectrum a little bit. So what we've got here are the artifacts that get created, right? The artifacts go everywhere from just the presentation layer all the way up to that complex functionality that's in the background, right? And then at the top, the activities, they go from that really super strategic business all the way over to the more tactical technology. So the people down here, this is where your developers are. Now, you could make a perfectly good living as a developer that just sits down there and doesn't care what it looks like and hasn't got a clue what business purpose it serves. It's probably not going to be a very fulfilling job. And those are the jobs that are getting offshored every day. So it's also going to be a job that's become very much a commodity. Because if you don't care what it looks like, then why do they need you as part of their team, right? They could just hire somebody from anywhere to do it. You've got the designers over here. If you don't care whether or not what you're designing works, and you don't care whether or not, I'm not even saying if you don't care, if you're not even being asked, if you're not even being told, what is the technology that you're designing for? What is the business purpose that you're solving? you're not going to be very valuable either. That's the person, you're going to end up working on pitch teams, which as an ex-agency person, I can tell you the pitch team is the worst team to be on. You'll get called out of bed at 4 o'clock in the morning to design something and you'll get yelled at for it. So you don't want to be there. So if you look up here, the more tactical, functional, that's kind of where the BAs sit, right? Business analyst. Now, I'm not saying all BAs and all UI developers are in these corners, but that's sort of the sweet spot of if you're a BA, but you're not thinking about the strategic nature of what you're doing, or if you're not thinking about, all you're thinking is the business process and you're not thinking about the actual functionality and how it's going to work, you're probably in trouble. Now, last but not least is up there in the upper left-hand corner, which is like the holy grail. Everybody in UX wants to be up there. Ronnie and I used to work together. Our former boss, he always had this matrix, and he was always like, we want you to be the smartest person in the room, and we want to be up in that corner. We want to be strategic, and that's great. But what you get up there, and Ronnie was just telling a hilarious story earlier about how I ended up being the owner of a DuPont account that I did not want because we had a strategist who was way up there. And what that meant was he was really smart. He was really smart. He understood the strategy. He understood the users. He had done the research. He spent 3 hours showing the client the research, presenting it all. And then the client looked at him and said, great, what do I do with this? And it was probably about that much silence, but to hear Ronnie tell it, it went on for about a half hour because it probably felt that way to him. That's the danger up there. If you get so strategic that you can't actually, it's not just what's next, but the research findings were there was no data visualization in it. It was words. It was wall-to-wall words. It was, I don't even know how, it was like a 100-page PowerPoint. I'm not kidding. If you're up there, you have to also be thinking, how do I visualize what I'm saying to them? What does it mean? How does it actually get implemented? So for any of these corners, no matter where you are, you kind of have to think, which direction do I want to go? And you don't have to go in all of them, but if you're a visual designer and you love doing visual design, and I've got a designer now, she does not necessarily love to be in front of clients, and I'm not going to push her, but then where I am going to push her is you might want to start to learn a little bit of development because you might want to be able to design and code. So it's fine if you don't want to go in that direction. Whatever direction you want to go in, you just can't stay in that corner. And it's the same thing over here with developers. Although, I would encourage all UI developers, learn a little bit about design, learn enough about design so that you can see whether or not what you coded matches what the Photoshop file is that you got. Doesn't always happen. But but even for developers, if you don't really care about necessarily the visual design piece of it, you should probably be starting to think more about the business purposes and the business processes, because as you do that, it's going to make you more valuable to your customer. So I want to do a little bit of exercise, and hopefully this won't turn into, I've only got about 5 minutes, so I might not actually, what I was going to do was start to map, so first of all, I was going to use Post-its, and I was going to map things on the screen until I saw the screen, and Tobias warned me that we would need a cherry picker for me to actually be able to do that. So I'm going to do this a little bit on the fly. But what I'm doing here is I'm doing a little bit of a, for those my age, a little bit of a what color is your parachute for UX, which I said that to 30-year-olds that I worked with, and they didn't know what I was talking about, but I think it'll actually be fine if we just do that. But what I want to get at is, so for you, I want you to think about that matrix that I put up there. Think about where you fall on the matrix or where you think, and then sort of put that out of your mind for a second, because I want to just ask a couple of questions around what inspires you. So I'm just shout it out. I don't want Tobias to have to run around with the microphone, but just a couple of ideas of what is it about UX, what made you want to come here, and what makes you want to do UX? Anyone? It could be you could love to do journey maps. You could, love to debug code. Learning, but learning what?
Well, I'm a student, so I kind of want to get experience more than just, instead of just what I'm wanting to do, just get wider.
So it sounds to me, if I'm not mistaken, like you want to learn a little bit more about the strategy behind it. Well, so that's good, because what that says to me, that's a good sort of segue. If you are a student, if you don't know what you want to do, then do exactly that. Explore the different areas of this matrix. Look at UX strategy, look at visual design, understand how they play with each other. What are some other things?
I came into it as a user advocate.
So the user, so understanding the user and their needs.
Yeah, because I was a tech writer for forever, and, you know, the perfect manual, you shouldn't, if the product is right, you shouldn't need the manual. So I saw there was like job obsolescence there.
Right.
So I wanted to help make the product not need the manual.
Well, so what's interesting is it sounds to me like you already took that journey a little bit, right? You sort of started out over here on the right, and you saw it, right? You saw the writing on your wall, and you're like, I gotta move over a little bit.
And I'm kind of in the left corner now, so, you know, I'm bouncing back and forth.
Well, here's what I would argue, though, when you're like, you're kind of in the left corner. As long as you don't forget where you came from, and you don't forget the technical side, you're not all the way over in the left corner. You are somewhere in between. What are some other things that you love doing even in your job? Dave?
Making beautiful things people love to use.
See, that's beautiful too, because it's not just the lower corner. If you just said making beautiful things, well, I know you, so I know. David also teaches the class with us. If you said just making beautiful things, I would encourage you to decide, but it's beautiful things that people love to use. You sort of moved up a little bit into UX strategy. You need a little piece of all of those. So are there anything else people can think of about like what they sort of love about what they do? Chica?
Well, I don't actually have a job yet, so this is what I imagine I will love.
That's perfect.
But I don't know, I really like making things, but I also kind of really like understanding like why and how people are doing stuff. So that's sort of my intersection, I guess.
You're shooting for the middle, it sounds like. Which honestly is good, but be careful. You want to make sure that you've got something you're really, really good at, and then you have an understanding of those other things. Yeah, this is one of those rare cases where being in the middle is actually not a bad thing because it means you're sort of interdisciplinary. Are there so many others?
Yeah, I like to make the process more efficient, but not necessarily pretty.
Right, so you're sort of towards the top, right? You want to think about the functionality, not worry so much about it being pretty. Okay. So now the other question, and this is an important one as you start to think about your future, what do you hate? What do you hate to do? And I will start off by telling you, I spent years trying to be on projects that never had development, and even now I will fess up. Luckily I rose high enough in the organization that I can run away from a project after it gets closer to development and I have a team working on it. I don't like the development piece, and I'll tell you why, because my heart gets broken so many times. I know it's right, you do it, and it's not even the developer's fault, because NTT, we've got some of the best developers out there, but when the client is on SharePoint 2009, there's only so much you can do. SAP is one of our biggest practices. There is only so much we can do with SAP. If anything, I think content strategy is really valuable for SAP because you can do some stuff. So I will start it by saying that I don't like the development piece. That it's okay if you do, but what that means is I started my career sort of all the way down here and sort of went over here. What that means to me is if you don't like the development piece, start thinking about where else you should be and build those skills. So what are some other things that you guys hate about your job, about UX? Come on, there's got to be something.
I think the biggest thing, I think a lot of us have been through it, is there's no support for the product. So we come up with this great design or this great research or whatever, and it goes nowhere.
Now,
Anybody who's been in this business more than a year or even less than that has been through that. And you get used to it because it's
you do, and it was funny. There was another quote that I missed that was, it was apathy killed UX. Was somebody else? It's the same thing, because right, you get used to it, and you slip into, my team calls it, they're like, they roll their eyes and they go, Lisa has slipped into, just tell me where to put the sofa, lady. And that's exactly what happens, right? Because you're arguing for the right thing, and then finally you just look at the client and you're like, just tell me where to put the sofa, lady. I don't care. You want it over here, I'll put it over there. It's exhausting. But what that says is you want to try to push to be more over in the strategy and the business, because the people who are actually sitting there, here's the thing: is there's never going to be nothing that pisses you off, right?
I still have this eternally ideal. You have to be positive, because I think all of us, we're kind of masochists in this field. If anybody's been in this field any length of time, we're lucky we even have a UX field. I got involved in the field 20 years ago. My headhunter said, what do you want to do? I said, I want to be a usability specialist. And she said, what's that? In 1999. So it's like a matter of like scratching and clawing to get opportunities. So to me, it's a matter of being happy that I have the opportunity to do this kind of work and understand that a lot of companies are not along the way that they need to be, and you just gotta keep plugging away. So I don't think
do.
it's apathy so much as maintaining the idealism, but just being thrilled that something actually sees the light of day.
And I would agree. And I honestly, probably at least once a week, ask myself, like, why didn't I become something else? I mean, the thing is, I had no choice, right? This is what I love to do. You have to love to do that. And that's part of the reason that I'm asking you to think about, what do you hate? Where does it fall on this spectrum? And how do you get away from it? Because if you actually hate it, you're not going to be able to do this. Because you already have so many people every day explaining to you why they don't need you and why you're not valuable and why your skill set isn't necessary, that if you start to believe it, it ain't going to work. So it's got to be something that you've got to find something that you feel passionate about. And it can be code. I know he doesn't work for me. He works for himself. But one of the best coders that I know, he's the best coder that I know because he is passionate. He is obsessed with making whatever he coded responsive, but looking exactly like the PSD that somebody gave him. And that's what he loves, and that's what he's passionate about. And that's actually, you made my point for me. You have to try to figure out what are the things that are going to demotivate you. And they can't be other people, right? Because other people are going to they're going to try, but you have to figure out what is going to demotivate you yourself. What is going to frustrate you? And how do you keep yourself from getting demotivated? How do you keep yourself? We have to be cheerleaders. You know what I mean? For ourselves. How do you make it so that, and I promise you, I'll go into a meeting and I'm just like, and then you go in and you're like, I believe in this and I'm going to make you believe in it. And confidence goes a really long way. And then sometimes you just have to, sometimes it becomes a hostage negotiation. So sometimes you're just like, you know what, I'm gonna get as far as I can.
Can I please at least have this,
I think I'm out of time. So there you have it. So try to be passionate.